Alrighty, yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Mr. DDG94, back with another reaction video. And today we finna react to what made Static Shock so great. Oh man, Static Shock. Superhero Static Shock. Oh man, Static Shock. This is my GOAT. This is my GOAT right here. In my 2000s, in the 2000s, Static Shock was my Spider-Man was my GOAT, but Static Shock was my number two though, for sure. But anyway, so without further ado, let's get right into it.
Do you remember Static Shock? It was one of my favorite TV shows growing up. It was unique to me in the fact that it would often cover topics you just wouldn't see covered in TV shows, especially for kids around that time, about the early 2000s. It was a part of the DC animated universe, which was one of the biggest superhero TV shows and connected universes at the time. And today I want to take a look back at Static Shock specifically, because it doesn't usually get as much press as the other DC Animated Universe TV shows from around this time, and it was my personal favorite. And I figure no better place to start than with the tale of two fathers. I want to show how Static Shock deals with the family dynamics of being a hero. Static, because of the nature of what he does, oftentimes blows off time with his family and is often disappointing his father and sister, who are waiting for him at home or at different events that he is often late to. This came to a head within episode 9, where Static's dad was basically upset with him and feels as though he's being irresponsible and ignoring his family.
Weeks I've been watching you become more and more irresponsible. And now you don't even have time for the community center?
And while Static is frustrated by this, his friend Richie would try to let him in on the fact that his dad doesn't know that he's Static. His dad just sees him disappearing for hours at a time with no real answers. But Virgil doesn't really want to confront this, at least not right now. He would much rather go to being Static, something that he is good at. It's like his escape from having to deal with his real life problems. Except this time, Static's run into another Bang Baby that he simply can't deal with. Bang Babies is this show's way of calling people a metahuman. That's how Static got his powers, and how he is going to fight a majority of the people with powers. Now, who he is fighting in this episode isn't exactly a Bang Baby, but rather somebody who is using chemical materials in order to gain powers, and inadvertently gains the power to see Static's identity. But let's get into who this is. Junior is the son of Edwin Alba. He is a gigantic mogul who happens to run a bunch of companies and is extremely rich, but he's also an extremely overbearing father. Someone who pretty much does not care for his son in the same type of way that Norman Osborn ignored Harry Osborn in Spectacular Spider-Man, except this show did it first. Regardless, Junior is known to mess up a lot, especially when talking to the media. His father would much rather Junior just be out of the picture of anything. We see throughout this entire episode that Junior is nothing but berated by his father Edwin. And what kind of effects does that have on somebody, especially his age? Even when he tries to come to his dad with new ideas for the company or with something that might work, he is always shut down and essentially told that he is stupid and not worth being taken care of or even listened to by his father.
Edwin Alva Jr., my legacy. I'd be better off with a statue.
And so, because Junior wants attention, he wants his father's love and he wants his father's respect, he decides to go out of his way to take away the only thing his father has that would get his attention, and that's his father's finances. He decides to take the chemicals that he has been researching and use them to gain powers, all in a bid to get his father's attention. And even when he tries his best to get his dad's attention, to destroy the things that his dad has built, it doesn't really work, not in the way he thought it would. He doesn't really gain any more attention from his dad, but instead just gets a slight catharsis from destroying the empire his father has built. But that is in stark contrast to how Virgil's dad decides to deal with this situation. While Virgil's dad is upset and frustrated with Static, he doesn't really try to essentially put him down throughout all of it.
It's like I have no idea what's going on in your life anymore, Virgil. I just don't know what...
All he wants to do is truly understand his son, especially as a father who feels as though he's growing apart from his son, not only due to the death of his wife, Virgil's mother, but also due to the fact that he is simply going to have to let Static grow up a little and give him more free reign. Now, by this point in the episode, Static has already had his identity revealed by Junior, and Junior threatens to reveal Static's identity to the public if he decides to take any action against Junior. But Static simply decides that it's not going to be worth it to let Junior continue to wreck his father's facilities. Instead, he goes to Junior's father, Edwin, and decides that he is going to give him the information on who has been attacking him, and instead he is going to tell his father outright what he is doing as Static Shock, in an attempt to hopefully allow him and his father to mend fences and to better understand each other. And that's in stark contrast again to Edwin. Edwin decides to just berate his son once again and doesn't even really want to talk to him. He simply just wants to stop him and expect Junior to listen to his every word because he simply said it. Which, of course, ends up backfiring horribly because why would Junior listen at this point when he's already so angry at his dad? Now, when it does come to Virgil's father, he was still on the edge of just grounding Virgil, just being angry and upset. But it's actually Virgil's sister that would give him the insight that he needed and the time he needed to reflect and truly understand where Virgil himself is coming from.
Quote me, I'll deny it, but Virgil's a great guy. Give him the benefit of the doubt.
Something I find great that this show does is that it shows that Virgil's father can be not only a strong black male role figure, but that he can also have compassion, that he can have a sense of understanding for where his son is coming from and how his son is doing. And I think it's really wonderful, especially with the speeches we get from him.
Look, I know you miss your mother. I haven't done a great job of helping you deal with that. But I've watched you handle it better than I have, frankly. I don't say it enough. I'm proud of you, son.
Virgil's dad truly does just accept that his son is going to do things outside of him, and he would rather put faith into the fact that what his son is doing is the right thing, to put faith in the child that he raised, rather than try and push down on him and potentially ruin the relationship that the two have. Were Virgil's dad's concerns legitimate? Yes, but I think the way in which he decided to handle it by letting Virgil spread his wings a little bit was really wonderfully done. Now, Edwin, of course, decides to go on a full rampage against his son, trying to get him to stop, and Junior, of course, is just going to escalate the situation. Static wasn't going to be able to beat Junior no matter what, but oddly enough, just like Edwin had asked for, Junior tried to use all of the powers at once and ended up turning himself to stone. Edwin got exactly what he wanted, just not in the way he would have wanted. And I think it's a really sad ending to this episode, but it just felt so real.
He alive?
I don't know. I never should have told you. But I thought a father could work things out with his son. Even you.
The next episode I want to cover is actually the last of season 1. It really delves into Static and dealing with the trauma of losing his mother, something that he really hasn't dealt with throughout this first season. We've seen glimpses and we've seen him talk about his mother, but we never really see him linger on it for too long. It's a really touchy subject for Virgil that he would just rather ignore a majority of the time. He never really processed the emotions that come with losing a parent, specifically his mother, and this episode goes out of its way to show us this. Virgil is talking about the action portion of this episode through flashbacks as he sits at his mother's grave. And what we see is that even when Virgil is spending time with his classmates and hanging out with the people that he calls friends, his mom is still on his mind. When one of his friends, Daisy Watkins' mother, comes up to talk to the group, Static seems to linger on that. He seems to watch Daisy walk with her mother longingly, as though it is something he misses. And now, typically Virgil will just bottle this up. He'll go hang out with Richie, or he'll simply just go be Static, because there's always crime to solve, and there's always somebody that needs his help. And so he would much rather do that than have to truly sit down and have the hard conversation of the death of his mother. Static has become Virgil's escape. But even in Virgil's escape, he cannot escape the memory and the thoughts of his mother.
Whoever you are, your mother must be really proud of you.
Yeah, she sure would be.
And even when Virgil gets home, he has to be confronted with the memory of his mom. Virgil's family is getting ready to give his mother a proper service and proper funeral, and in the process, Virgil has to be confronted with his family, watching these videotapes and reliving the good memories they had with each other. Except Virgil just can't do that. It's really hard for him to try and remember his mom, to even want to think about it. It hurts too much, and I've definitely been there before. So Virgil just bottles it up and instead just decides to be Static. He avoids spending time with his family and simply wants to be left alone. But even being Static isn't really going well for him, and he explains this to his mom, as he pretty much gets trounced at every single opportunity by the newest villain of the week. And even when Virgil decides to call it a day and tries to go home, he is once again confronted with the fact that he needs to make a speech for his mother. His sister is really trying to push him hard to make this speech, but Virgil just does not want to do it at all.
I took it as a given that you were gonna do this.
And that's the problem right there. No one asked me about this from jump. No one even thought about how I feel about this whole thing.
Static basically loses his cool at his sister because she's insinuating that he has to do this, that he has to relive these painful memories of his mother, something he does not want to do at all. And so he would rather run. But it is once again Static's dad who comes in with a lot of empathy and gives Static a different perspective on this. He tries to tell Static that he understands what it's like, that he is himself angry and sad and upset, but that he would be doing this for his mother, and he gives Static an out that if he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to, and he apologizes for not helping Static grieve as best as he could. But it's after that conversation with Virgil's father, and while spending some time with Richie, that Virgil finally decides to sit down and actually watch some of the things that the tapes have in store. Richie basically forces Virgil to watch the tapes back of his mother and how he was doing as a child. Now, does Richie do this because he knows what Virgil's going through? No, he simply does this because he's Virgil's close friend. And he wants to make fun of Virgil. But for Virgil, this really does open his eyes to his mother, and it also gives him an idea on how to defeat the supervillain of the week. But it also allows him to start the healing process, oddly enough. The lessons Virgil's mom left for him on those tapes, by mistake, ended up saving Virgil's life in this episode, and ended up allowing him to defeat this Bang Baby by essentially tiring the dude out until he was no longer able to rage out. And it was through all of this that Virgil could finally start the healing process, even though it had been months since his mother had died. This show tackled grief in a way that I thought was pretty unique, and felt like real life. You don't just get over the death of a close family member within a few days or a few weeks. Grief takes time. This show understood that, and it also gave us an absolutely wonderful speech that Virgil had for his mother's eulogy.
For the longest time, I missed my mother so much, I forced myself not to think about her. But now I know that was wrong. I've learned something just recently that's very important. My mother's physical being may be gone, but her spirit is still very much alive within me. And it always will be. Thank you.
The final episode I wanted to cover today really goes over the notion that Static Shock as a TV show does not pull its punches at all. While Static is often a show for kids that is involved with elements of just being a superhero and being a fun action show, it also strove to give and teach people lessons through the show. Now, the way in which it went about doing so, I felt was really well done, and this episode speaks to me very much, especially as a young kid. Static is a little bit questioning about why his best friend Richie is never at his house, especially when they hang out. Throughout the entire first season, we never see Static go to Richie's house, and so Static really does want to go when his sister brings that up. But Richie is extremely hesitant to have Static over at his house for no known reason to Virgil. So Virgil pushes and just basically says to Richie that he really wants to hang out at his house, to have a sort of change of pace. And even though Richie doesn't really want to do it, he does end up saying yes, simply because Virgil is his best friend, and he wants to hang out with Virgil and make him happy, even if it means doing something he doesn't really want to. And everything was going great the night Virgil decided to go over to Richie's house. His mother seemed nice, and the two of them were enjoying things. That is, until Richie's father came home.
Father, I better go talk to him.
I thought he was on the night shift.
It got changed.
Cool. I get to meet your pops after all.
Hold up, V.
From the second that Richie's father stepped foot inside of his house, you could see the tension on his face, and it was palpable. Richie's dad is a bigot, for lack of better terms. He is a racist who simply does not like black people. It is very evident throughout this episode, and they don't pull their punches in displaying this. Now, Virgil, of course, doesn't want to just make the assumption off rip, but the way in which his father decides to talk to Virgil, and the way in which he seemingly hates on black culture, is something that Static takes note of. But he's not quick to jump to conclusions. Hell, even Static's own father doesn't really like hip-hop music, but not necessarily to the degree that Richie's dad doesn't like it. The two characters dislike it for different reasons, but Virgil doesn't really read into this too much and doesn't really take it to heart. Instead, he feels like he can just win over Richie's dad by being himself, and he's getting ready to do that before he gets ready for bed.
And now I see why Richie acts like a hood, Maggie. That kid's a bad influence. All his kind are.
Keep your voice down.
It's bad enough I gotta deal with them all day long. Now one of them's in my house.
Hey! What you talking about? What's going on over here?
Hulk Hogan, we coming for you, nigga!
Static never expected this, especially not from Richie's father. Richie had never displayed anything like this, and as a matter of fact, the two have been extremely close friends for a long time. And of course, this angers Richie to no end. Virgil is his best friend, and to see the way in which his father treated him, it just makes him angry. Now, Static's father does a really good job of trying to put this into perspective, and also trying to remind Virgil that he's going to need to support Richie at this pivotal moment in his life, especially if Richie is going to be arguing with his dad. Mainly because Virgil's father believes in being better, that the next generation can be better. And while all of this is going down, Richie ends up running from his home. He ran away because he does not want to be associated with his father. That's how strongly Richie feels about this entire situation. His father has essentially pushed him away emotionally a long time ago, but now he has also pushed him away in a physical sense. And even when Richie's dad tries to talk to Virgil's father in search of his own son, he still can't see past his own worldview to help find his own son.
Richie always goes on and on about Virgil and his cool dad, but he never even told me you were...
African American? Would that have made a difference to you, Foley? Or should it have?
This is a waste of my time.
Wait, I've got a few ideas about where he might go.
I don't want your help, Hawkins.
You need my help, like it or not.
Virgil went out to find Richie, specifically just to be able to talk to him and just show his support for his best friend. He wants to be there for him, even if Richie doesn't really want anybody around at this moment, simply because he is trying to deal with the reality of his situation. But unfortunately, by Static talking to Richie, in costume, of course, and by the two characters being in close proximity, it triggers Static's villain of the week, who ends up deciding to capture Richie and take him hostage, as Static has to go be Static Shock and deal with another emergency. Something I think Virgil's dad should be more noted for is his simple level of patience. He is dealing with Richie's father in an extremely compassionate way, especially for some of the things that Richie's dad has said throughout their time looking for their sons together. And even though it had reached a boiling point for Virgil's father, he still handled it in an extremely calm manner, and at the end of the day, all Virgil's dad wanted was the best for Richie, because that is his son's best friend.
What your son heard, Hawkins. I wasn't talking about him.
No, you were talking about his kind, that's all. Well, I know your kind, Foley. I've seen your kind all my life. A fine, upstanding bigot. His nose so close to the grindstone he can't see anything else. Meanwhile, the world changes and grows, and he's blind to it. Ignorant, and proud of that, too. And you know the worst part?
I'm sure you'll tell me.
You've got a terrific son. One of the best and brightest around. And because of the way you are, you'll never really know him. Richie ran away from you a long time ago, Foley. And who can blame him?
Of course, in the climax of the episode, Richie is going to be saved by not only Virgil's father, his own father, but by Static Shock and his own willingness to try and save the people around him. Now, of course, this is just supposed to be a cathartic ending to save Richie. This portion of the episode is for, the fact that it's a superhero show and there needs to be action in every single episode. But it still finishes out the story that was set up in a really great manner. And at the end of the episode, when everything was really said and done, all Richie's dad cared about was the fact that he got his son back, and the fact that maybe he should take better care of the fact that his son's best friend just is a black kid. It's just the real thing that is. And something I think that was really nice at the end of the episode, which isn't always the most realistic, is that Richie's dad decides to broaden his worldview. He wasn't a bad person at the end of the day, just a person stuck in his own ways. And the episode shows that people can change, at least the hope that they can change for the better. This episode speaks to me on a personal level. When I was growing up, I knew a lot of people like Richie's father, whether they were my age or adults, and that was really hard to navigate when I was a kid, especially being in an area where I was really the only black child around. There weren't many people who looked like me in the schools I went to, and so it was really hard trying to figure out how to navigate situations like this. And this TV show gave me an episode that made me feel heard. It made me feel understood, if that makes sense. I felt like I wasn't the only person going through this, and that all came from a simple episode of TV. But it also gave me some perspective on the people who are doing the same thing that Richie's father would. It made me realize that sometimes some people's faces are just too close to the grindstone, and that maybe they aren't all just bad people, and that maybe they just need to have their worldviews broadened. It was this episode that truly made me fall in love with this TV show and with the character of Static Shock. I felt heard and I felt understood. And I know I don't really do this whole stand on a pedestal and preach to you guys. It's not really why my channel's here, but I'm also going to speak my truth with this channel. And I figured including this episode in the first time I cover Static Shock is my way of doing it. All I ask of you guys is that maybe you think more consciously about how you interact with other people. That's it. Do it if you want, or don't do it if you don't want to. I'm not going to tell you to. Once again, thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, please leave me a like, it helps a lot. If you feel so inclined to subscribe, it's free, and you can unsubscribe at any time. If you want to dislike the video, please dislike it and then tell me why, down in the comments below. And finally, I do have a Patreon where you can see all of these videos early and unedited.
Alright, All right. Anyways, most definitely, man. Static Shock was Static. This is why Static Shock was one of them shows, bruh. They didn't pull back no punch. That's why the 2000s is the best era, bruh. They didn't hold back no punches. We weren't so politically correct all the time. We could give content without filter. That was why the 2000s were the best times. But anyways, though, that's just gonna about do it for this one. I'll see y'all in the next video. Till then, peace out.